Hey there, weird and wonderful people. I am back. Thank you guys so much for the delay. I kind of got a little sick, but I got my voice back. With this project, we've got another raffle winner. This time, because I've been kind of on dragons, because I like dragons, and the House of the Dragon thing was fun. I have the winner of the November House of the Dragon raffle. With this cute little girl. With the winner from Twitter. Let's get started. Brought in a big line of action for this dragon. Dragons are very powerful, and this one definitely seems to work more on symmetry, but I wanted a very asymmetrical pose for her because it's very hard to keep symmetry but still have something look fluid. Went through a couple passes of trying to see where this pose is, and sometimes it's just not really coming along the way I like. That is until I made this flat side view of the head, and I really liked how angular and how unique that looked. So I'm like, I'll start with this first pass and do another quick pass just to see how it feels to try something new. But the more I was starting to play with this first kind of pass, I was really starting to like the silhouette of it. It looked clean, legible, and the wings were definitely interesting to try to intricate. Usually I like to try to have a very open body language so you can see more of what's going on. But as I'm working through this, I realized it just looked so wonky and off balance. So I brought the arm down in more of a neutral place. I tried my hardest to show the belly, but ultimately it just looked a lot cleaner with having both of the wings on the floor, and most of the details were in the back of the wings to begin with anyway. Brought in for more of a side profile because keeping with the line of, hey, what if these are references? How would the head look in a different angle? What are some interesting key points? So brought in a very rough view of the head, and as you'll notice through the majority of this, I struggled with the head a lot. With the more angular and narrow of a muzzle a beast or creature has, sometimes it can be really hard to have it looking at the camera without having it look a bit derpy. And I really struggled with that. Part of these videos is not to show, ooh, this is so clean, this is how perfection is. No, this is showing how I did everything wrong and how I fixed it. How to work through hurdles you never anticipated. I put the head on pause and decided to work more with the wings, with the webbing taking up the most of the page and stuff like that, and just really kind of push and pulled how the silhouette is. Wings are very important with dragons because, not many dragons don't have wings, but when they're in the sky in like a show or a movie or whatever, you need to be able to easily identify, oh, that's this dragon, oh, that's this person. So I wanted to have more of an almost jagged wing shape compared to what I did before with Monarch. First pass, I was happy with it. Looked a little bit messy, so it was time to clean it up with the second pass. Second pass, as you know, I do with blue. This is where I actually bring in the anatomy, the details. How does everything work together instead of just the feeling and the silhouette. Brought down the reference for this dragon to be more on model. There is a lot going on with this dragon, and I made the executive decision to simplify some things a bit more. There's a lot of really harsh diamond and V shapes in the head, and the head looks extremely tiny. And the more I was trying to, not just fighting with the jaw and the muzzle of this thing, I realized and kind of made the executive decision to simplify it. I'll bring in details with texture instead of just focusing on hard lines, because with such a tight space to work with the head, it can get really muddled very easily if you put in too much detail. Especially if you're zoomed out, this needs to be able to be really legible. And I struggled a lot with the head, because how do you do a head straight on and not have it look like a derpy snake? And I really learned a lot from this. When you look at the actual reference itself, it looks like it comes to a fine point, almost like a beak or something. But I wanted, like I said, to stay in more alliance with the show of have it be draconic. So I tried to maybe throw in a little bit of alligator, mostly serpentine, and just, I wasn't having fun with the angle, guys. I struggled, but I think I leveled up a little bit more as an artist. Bringing in some of the details and the core components of the dragon, like the diamonds in the back of the head. I couldn't tell if that was part of the head plate itself or fringes along the crest. So I decided to go for kind of more of a safer option and have it be crests along the head where it can go up or down to show emotions and or maybe help with speed. I don't know, because I said so. But ultimately, those are the only major spikes and stuff I did on the head. I wanted the head to speak for itself, and if I did a ton of detail on the side profile, on the close-up, I would have to replicate it on the full body. And like I said, the head being so small, it would get muddy very easily. How to tell if a creature, or how to make a creature more adult or cool or striking compared to chibi and cute and stuff like that, is the size of the head and the size of the eyes. With very big bodies like this, if you want to make it more quote-unquote realistic as you can get with dragons, I guess, you would want the head to fit in the chest cavity at least 2, maybe even 3 times. Because the eyes are a big sign of how huge something is. For example, if you look at a house cat, their eyes take them about 3/4 of the head. Meanwhile, if you look at an elephant, the eyes take up about a 1/16 of the space on the head. So keeping with that, I assumed this would be quite a decent sized dragon. Wanted to keep things very small and narrow. Working with the body, I brought in the muscle structure for the wings, the shoulder, the collar blade, these gorgeous forearms. I'm quite proud of myself. And the webbing. I ultimately really liked the white kind of bone on the edges of the wing, and I really wanted to accentuate that with this. Of course, with the feet, we like the beans. Remember? Beans, we love the beans. That's how we do feet and hands. Tail didn't cause me too much trouble. Like I said before, my previous, making a very long, slender tail, work with the motion your wrist naturally produces. And the more zoomed out the more zoomed out you are of the canvas, the easier it will be to continue that curve. Forearms and wings have a lot of similarities, and I like bringing wings in as if they're hands, accentuating the fingers, forearm, shoulder, stuff like that. And that's just my way of doing it. You might find a different way of doing it with a different bone structure, but considering they have to be close to the body, out, wide range of motion, I just, with my mind, make it a little more sense to follow a bone structure and limbs that automatically do that. And bat wings have a very similar structure. So go off with what you know. Bringing in the scales and scutes, now that I understand how the body works, the anatomy, stuff like that, now is the time to actually start bringing in the details, the scales, the scutes. Scutes, for those of you who don't know, or the chest platings or bottom platings of a reptilian. Usually it would represent like the belly scutes of snakes or reptilians and stuff like that. Like I said, this is a very interesting design, but there's so much going on with it. It can be hard to bring everything in and still have it be aesthetically pleasing, but I still wanted to honor it. I decided for the top corner, probably top left corner of the page to be where the light is, and I thought it'd be easier to work with the wings than with the rest of the body, since the wing will ultimately be behind the body in the final draft and the final piece of the art piece. So starting with that just made it a little bit easier. Also a little bit more fun than focusing on the nitpick of the body and the face. Keeping in line with the very jagged feelings. And normally I would have the webbing come all the way up to the very tip of the fingerlets of the tip of the wing. But with this, I thought the white could maybe represent a little bit more of armor plating. Of maybe it could be used more of a blunt weapon for like diving down, whacking with the edge of the wing. So it would be more of bone cartilage. So made that a little bit more defined and not as flexible as the rest of the body may or may not have been. Line art went very smoothly with this. Since I've done most of the hard work with the first and second passes, I can kind of turn off my brain and just enjoy where this goes. Dark lines on the bottom, bright lines or very light lines towards the top left. And just follow the curve. This is where the personality really comes into play with the dragon. I also really love how he did this bottom back leg. It looks super cute. Bringing in the webbing of the second wing, I ultimately decided to slightly change the webbing pattern and having it a little bit closer together compared to more sprayed out with the other wing, considering this is folded up. Wanted to maybe bring some more interest in having the actual tips of the wing more fall in line with each other. With the thick stompers, I wanted more of like kind of frog fat padded legs where like most of the weight will be on the back or the back of the foot, and not have the claws be as accentuated because it looks like more of a dragon that would take off running than just jump and start compared to my own dragon or monarch. Wanted to bring more of an idea of how this dragon would move and the personality behind it. I figure yes, and slow would walk on all fours, but once it picks up speed, you need something a bit more sturdy that can handle the impact, even though he's got tiny, tiny little ankles. Very slender design, very sleek, and I wanted to try to follow the natural contours of the body as it's coming to me. For example, the horns. I want that to follow the first line of the muzzle as well as where the jaw is ending and accentuate that. Bring that further along to have more of a natural V shape. Big, thick, slender neck, but not too slender where it's not delicate, you know? Now it is time for the coloring. I decided to save myself a bit of trouble and bring in the coloring with kind of a dark foresty green, something I can still easily see the black through, but dark enough where I won't have to worry about going through second passes with the initial color. Bring in the color in, outlining very delicate lines against the actual line art, and then going in crazy once that's fully outlined. I went for a foresty green compared to a pink because most of this dragon is a type of green in some variation. It can be either a really dark green or more of a mossy green like on the wings. So instead of fighting what I was putting down, worked with something that will incorporate in just in case there's some mix-ups or I don't color everything exactly the way I want. And plus having this dark green, when I do decide to put in the white for the plating and the eventual hexagonal scales, it'll be a lot more vivid and a little bit easier to actually see compared to trying to do white on a slightly off-gray background. When I do art like this, especially if I know I'm going to be at the computer for a long time, I do a darker gray background because it's a little bit easier on your eyes. Human eyes are not meant to look at straight white for a long time. That's how you get snow blindness. For those of us in the northern hemisphere having to deal with such plight, I feel you. Stay warm, drink water, wear gloves. My fellow Canadians. So once everything's been nice and neatly packaged, I go in with a much larger brush just to save myself the hassle of constantly doing strokes with my wrist and eventually getting my wrist more tired than it needs to be when I could save that off for the fine details like the scales and the patterns and stuff like that. Again, since the wing is going to be mostly... Nope, I guess I went for the head. I didn't realize I went for the head. Starting with the white crests, making that very quick, nice flat color that's not quite all the way white, but not gray either. It's really hard to work with absolutes. Absolute white, absolute black, completely white, completely black. Because everything can get really lost in it. You can't do shadows if something is only black. You can't do highlights and show definition if something's only white. So I went for more of an off-white here so I could eventually come in with some different textures, which I ultimately did do at the end with, I believe, my chalk brush to bring in more of a scaly texture. Blocking out these base colors, and then with the next layer, once I'm done with the shoulders, the wings, the edge of the wing bone that I was talking about, the scoots, I could come in and focus more on the wing. So usually with my coloring phase, I'll have about 3 to 4 layers inside the clipping just to do, hey, first pass, this is the most broad color. Second pass, this is a color that many people might not notice, just to get the actual details. And that way when I do my actual shading and stuff like that, I don't have to worry about coloring over all the work I've already established. Bringing in with the main color of kind of more of a darker, almost black of the body. I'm actually color sampling to make sure, again, I honor the character that is before me. But the color, again, was so dark, especially when the body folds in on itself near the mid-back to the neck, that you didn't really notice these spines on it. So I went in with a lighter color just to more articulate that and have them a little bit more noticeable, even though they're still subtle near the end. The wing, I went kind of all out. It was a very interesting texture for the wings. So I thought it was kind of original creator was trying to imitate something like camouflage. So started off with a dark base, brought in some brights, brought in some big blotches of dark, and then bring in with some small blotches of mossy green just to have it a little bit more sporadic. I knew I didn't have to worry about too much about the actual definition of the fingerlings. I could bring that in with the actual multiply layer of when I start shading. Now I am starting to experiment a bit on bringing in texture to the actual forearms, the white parts, because I wanted something more subtle, but I still wanted to practice on pushing myself with different textures. So as I'm using, ultimately I started with a hard pastel and then went into the chalk, seeing what catches light, what didn't, and just kind of pushing that forward, back and forth multiple times with the head and the scoots and the forearms and stuff like that. Ultimately, I went with a hard chalk brush and slowly came in with a blur to kind of ease the texture a bit more. It did make it a little bit darker than what I meant, but that was easy to fix in itself. You can't go whiter than white, you can't go darker than black, so having more of a lighter gray sit very well with me. Now I'm coming back in, getting rid of all of the detail that I used for the dark gray, cleaning that up, and actually bringing in a slightly more muted gray to bring in definition. Where the scoots ended, how they rounded, the muscle structure on the actual arms, and showing that these scoots aren't actually flat, that they curve in each other, and following the light source I originally made of the top left. And just helps make a more of a definition with the horns and the crests on the top of the head, and a little bit more inside of the actual skull itself. I saw the blue I originally picked from the picture wasn't really noticeable, so I decided to do a little bit creative liberty and brought a little bit more of a saturated view on it. These hexagon scales I thought they would be a lot harder than they actually were, but I just had to keep doing V's and work instead of one individual. I'll start with a base and work everything off of that. Straight line, it was pretty much just a series of Y's. Once you got that first initial hexagon, you just had to keep following where that ended and continue doing the Y's. Who knew scales could be simple? Not me, I'm not used to it. I, for some reason, like working myself more than I need to. The hexagon on the original are also very stiff and stagnant, but if I did that, it would just look like a Photoshop texture just overlaid on top of it. I wanted to follow the seam of the actual dragon itself, make it look more organic, even though it is a very structured and rigid shape naturally. I also kind of went a little bit off base and added some to the frills the slight webbing of the actual wings, and did some creative liberty of adding a little bit more texture of the hexagons, kind of separating, becoming more fleshy towards the toes, before ultimately joining back up again and joining the main body, even though you don't really see it much from this angle. I still had to keep in mind how this would meet up to the rest of the body if I did a different pattern, so I just kept it very simple and light. I do really like the colors that the original creator made of having these hexagons such a pale blue or pale white compared to the green. It really brings a lot of interest down and up the body of the actual dragon. Now that I'm happy with the actual detail of it, it's time to bring in the shadows and the highlights. Like I said before, I like to do a very bright, desaturated blue on a multiply layer to bring in natural highlights and shadows, bring in natural shadows of the actual creature. And with the wings, you just had to keep in mind where the point of hitting the light really was to bring it more definition. And plus bringing in a blue shadow instead of something more with green, it really can, I enjoy the different subtleties with it. Well, there we go. What do you guys think? I quite like how this came out, despite the challenges that this gave me. But this is why I like doing raffles. It gets me outside my comfort zone. It gives me a new way to think of things. Unfortunately, you guys won't be seeing as many Let's Paints and drawing videos as I have. I'm currently working on storyboards, and hopefully this video will be done by the end of January, beginning of February, potentially. Knock on wood, hopefully. If I work my ass off, but I want to. No, I don't. Hopefully you guys will see it by or around February. Let me know what kind of videos you like. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and give me some more ideas. I like interacting with my community, and you guys can find me on Blue Sky. Stay safe and sane out there. Thank you for your time. Bye! Do